The crystal wine glass sat untouched, catching the amber light from the chandelier above. Callum Reed had stopped tasting expensive things 3 years ago. Now he just paid for them. His finger traced the rim slowly, watching condensation bead and fall like tiny surrenders. Around him, the restaurant hummed with the kind of quiet wealth that never needed to announce itself, soft piano keys floating through air thick with the scent of seared beef and old money. White tablecloths. Sterling silver catching reflections of people who'd forgotten what it meant to be hungry. He was 42 and felt ancient. The phone in his hand lit up with another message from his assistant. Board meeting tomorrow. Quarterly reports. Stakeholder expectations. Words that used to excite him now felt like obligations he carried in his chest, heavy and cold. He swiped it away without reading the rest. The steak before him had gone lukewarm. He'd ordered it because that's what he always ordered here. Vivian used to tease him about it, said he had the adventurous palate of a 5-year-old. Her laughter would echo across this very table, bright and uncontained, making other diners smile without knowing why. He blinked and she was there, just for a heartbeat, leaning forward with that crooked grin, wine-flushed and radiant, telling him about some ridiculous thing Bennett had done at school that day. Her hand reaching across the table to squeeze his. Real. Warm. Alive. He blinked again. Empty chair. Folded napkin. Silence. 3 years, 2 months, 14 days. Not that he was counting. Not that he woke up most mornings forgetting she was gone, reaching across cold sheets before memory crashed back in. Not that he saw her in every corner of their home until he couldn't stand being there anymore. Work became the escape. Meetings, mergers, acquisitions, problems that had solutions unlike grief. Unlike the son who looked at him now with eyes that held more absence than presence. Unlike the crushing weight of waking up every day and choosing to keep breathing when part of him had died with her. He'd learned to eat alone. It was easier than remembering what it felt like to share a meal with someone who mattered. The waiter approached with practiced deference, refilling water he hadn't touched. Will there be anything else this evening, Mr. Reed? No. Thank you. The young man retreated, footsteps silent on thick carpet. Callum wondered if he was invisible to these people or if they were just paid enough to pretend he was. Either way, the effect was the same. He picked up his fork. Put it down. The motions of living without the substance of life. Rain started outside, October weather turning cruel. He watched it streak the windows, distorting the street beyond into watercolor abstractions. People hurried past, umbrellas blooming like dark flowers. Going home. Going somewhere. Going anywhere that mattered. Have you ever felt invisible in a crowded room? Not because people can't see you but because you can no longer see yourself? The restaurant door opened, bringing with it a gust of cold air and the sound of rain drumming pavement. Callum didn't look up. Another patron, another stranger sharing this expensive loneliness. But then he heard it. A child's stomach growling. Audible even across the restaurant's hushed atmosphere. Followed by a small, embarrassed whimper. Sure, baby. Just a little longer. The voice was worn thin, stretched to breaking. Callum's eyes lifted without meaning to. A woman stood near the entrance, water dripping from her hair and the hem of her waitress uniform. Late 30s maybe, with the kind of exhaustion that lived in bones rather than just muscles. Her hand clutched that of a little girl, 7 or 8 years old, whose coat was 2 sizes too small and whose eyes were fixed on the tables around them with an expression Callum recognized. Hunger. Not the kind you felt before dinner. The kind that hollowed you out. The hostess approached, voice professionally cold. I'm sorry, but without a reservation. We're not staying. The woman's chin lifted slightly, pride flickering across her face like a candle in wind. We're just waiting for the rain to ease up. We'll stand by the door. We won't bother anyone. The hostess's expression suggested they already were. Callum found himself watching the exchange with something he hadn't felt in months. Curiosity maybe. Or recognition. He wasn't sure which. The little girl pressed closer to her mother, shivering. Her gaze swept the restaurant again and landed, directly on Callum's untouched plate. She stared at it the way drowning people stare at lifeboats. Their eyes met. Something about her face, the careful way she tried to hide her hunger, the dignity she was already learning at such a young age, cut through the fog he'd been living in. She looked away quickly, ashamed to have been caught wanting. The woman noticed the exchange. Her hand tightened on her daughter's shoulder, preparing to pull her away to leave, to protect what little pride they had left. Callum didn't think. Thinking would have stopped him. He stood. The mother's eyes snapped to him, wary. She'd learned to be suspicious of men who approached too quickly, too interested. Her body angled slightly, placing herself between Callum and her daughter. "I'm sorry to bother you." The words came out steadier than he expected, though his heart kicked against his ribs like it was trying to remind him he was still alive. "But I noticed. I couldn't help but see. He was terrible at this." When was the last time he'd spoken to a stranger without a contract between them? The woman's jaw set. "We're fine. We're leaving. Please." The word surprised him. I'm eating alone. Too much food. And it seems." He gestured vaguely at his table at the waste of it all. "If you're waiting anyway. Just until the rain stops." The woman stared at him like he'd spoken a foreign language. "We don't need charity." "It's not?" He stopped. Reconsidered. "I'm not trying to. I just thought." The little girl's stomach growled again, louder this time. The sound seemed to echo in the silence between them. The mother closed her eyes briefly, and Callum saw the war being waged behind them. Pride versus need. Self-sufficiency versus the animal desperation of a parent watching their child starve. When she opened them again, something had shifted. Not surrender. Decision. "My daughter is hungry." The words came out raw, stripped of pretense. "Can we stay for a while? Just until the rain stops." She reached into her pocket, pulled out a small handful of bills and coins. Her hand shook as she placed them on the nearest table. "I can pay." Callum looked down at the money. 3 crumpled dollar bills. 47 cents and change. Everything she had. Offered with the same dignity someone else might offer thousands. The crack in his chest, the one that had been there since Vivian died, widened suddenly, painfully. He'd forgotten this feeling. Being moved by something outside his own grief. "Keep it." His voice came out rougher than intended. "Please. I'm Callum." The woman studied him for a long moment, searching for ulterior motives for the catch. Whatever she saw must have passed some test because she nodded once, sharp and decisive. "Isla." She didn't offer her hand. "This is Bryn." The little girl looked up at her mother, eyes wide with hope and disbelief. Isla's hand on her shoulder tightened briefly, an entire conversation in one gesture. "Behave. Be grateful. Don't get used to this." Callum gestured toward his table. "Please." They moved like people who'd learned not to take up too much space in the world. Isla pulled out the chair for Bryn first, making sure she was settled before sitting herself. Both of them perched on the edge of their seats, ready to bolt if this kindness turned cruel. The waiter appeared, eyes widening slightly at the wet waitress uniform, the child in the too small coat. Callum saw the judgment forming and cut it off. "2 menus, please." He kept his voice level, the tone he used in boardrooms when he expected to be obeyed. "And perhaps something warm to drink for my guests." The waiter's training won over his judgment. "Of course, sir." When he left, silence settled heavy over the table. Callum's untouched steak sat between them like an accusation. Bryn stared at it. Then at him. Then at her mother, a question in her eyes. Isla started to speak, probably to tell her daughter not to stare, not to want, not to hope, but Callum moved first. He pushed the plate across the table. No words. No ceremony. Just the simple act of offering what he didn't need to someone who did. Bryn looked at her mother again. Isla's throat worked, swallowing something, tears maybe, or the last shred of her pride. Finally she nodded. The little girl picked up the fork with both hands like it was precious. She cut a small piece, brought it to her mouth and closed her eyes as she chewed. The expression on her face was reverence. When was the last time Callum had tasted food like that? When had eating become just another obligation instead of a pleasure? "Thank you," Isla whispered. The words seemed scraped from somewhere deep. "You didn't have to. It was getting cold anyway." The lie was gentle. They both knew it. The waiter returned with menus and 2 cups of hot chocolate, steam curling upward. Bryn's eyes went wide. Isla's jaw tightened again, that same war playing out across her features, but she accepted it with a quiet nod. Callum ordered more food without asking what they wanted. Soup, bread, chicken. Simple things that wouldn't embarrass, wouldn't highlight the gap between his world and theirs. The waiter wrote it down and left, moving faster now, perhaps sensing his tip depended on discretion. Bryn ate slowly, savoring each bite like it might be her last. Between mouthfuls, she looked up at Callum with those 2 old eyes. "Why do you look so sad if you have so much food?" "Bryn." Isla's voice was sharp with mortification. "I'm sorry, she doesn't mean to be rude, she just..." "She's right." The words came out before Callum could stop them. Isla stared at him. Bryn tilted her head, studying him with the brutal honesty only children possessed. "Are you sad because you're alone?" the little girl asked. Bryn, that's enough. Isla's hand covered her daughter's. I'm so sorry. She doesn't understand. I am alone, Callum said quietly. Most of the time. The admission hung in the air between them. Isla's expression shifted, still wary but something softer underneath. Recognition maybe. She understood loneliness too. We're alone too, Bryn announced matter-of-factly. But Mama says it's okay because we have each other. That's different, Callum said. You have each other. That's everything. Isla's eyes glistened suddenly. She blinked hard, looking away. When she spoke, her voice was careful. We manage. The food arrived, breaking the moment. Isla immediately began cutting Bryn's chicken into smaller pieces, her movements practiced and maternal. Callum watched the simple ritual and felt something twist inside him. Bennett. When was the last time he'd cut his son's food? When was the last time they'd eaten together at all? He couldn't remember. You work nearby? He asked the question more to fill the silence than from real curiosity, but Isla nodded. The diner next door. Night shift. She kept cutting, not meeting his eyes. And I clean offices downtown. 3 to 7 a.m. And I do catering on weekends when I can get it. 3 jobs. Callum tried to imagine it, the exhaustion that never ended, the juggling of shifts, the constant calculation of hours versus dollars versus survival. That's a lot. She finally looked at him, and something like defiance flickered across her face. We do what we have to do. I wasn't judging. Everyone judges. The words were flat, factual. Single mother. Poor. Working class. There's always judgment. He couldn't argue with that. He'd probably been guilty of it himself, abstractly, in boardrooms where poverty was a statistic rather than a person sitting across from you with rain in her hair and pride in her eyes. Where are you staying? The question came out before he considered whether he had the right to ask it. Isla's jaw tightened. We're between places at the moment. Between places meant homeless. The euphemism sat heavy between them. We're fine, she added quickly. We have my car. We're managing. Living in a car. With a 7-year-old daughter. Working 3 jobs and still not enough to afford first and last month's rent for an apartment. The crack in Callum's chest widened further. How long? He asked quietly. 2 weeks. Since the eviction. Isla's hands stilled on the silverware. Rent went up. I couldn't make it anymore. But I'm waiting on my tax refund. Another week, maybe 2, and we'll have enough for a deposit somewhere. 2 weeks living in a car. 2 more weeks to go. A month of a child sleeping in a back seat, doing homework by streetlight, pretending everything was normal. Callum thought of his estate, 8 bedrooms, most of which no one had entered in years. The guest house that sat empty because he couldn't stand having people around. The wealth he'd accumulated like armor, protecting him from feeling anything at all. And here was this woman, this child, with nothing. Less than nothing. And somehow they had more dignity, more grace, more genuine life than he'd felt in 3 years. Bryn finished her chicken and looked up at her mother with an expression of such pure contentment that it broke something in Callum. Just a meal. Just one warm meal, and it was everything to her. What would it be like to want something that simple? To find joy in something so basic? He'd forgotten. The rain continued outside, showing no signs of stopping. Isla glanced toward the windows, worry creasing her forehead. Probably calculating, how long until her shift started tomorrow, how much gas she had left, where they could park safely for the night. Callum made a decision. Not a logical one. Not one his board would approve of or his lawyers would understand. But the first decision in 3 years that felt like something other than just going through motions. I have a proposition, he said. Isla's eyes snapped to his, immediately suspicious. I'm not. Not that. He held up his hands. Nothing like that. I have a son. Bennett. He's 10. And I'm... The words stuck in his throat. Admitting failure wasn't something he did often. I'm not very good at being his father. Isla's expression shifted, caution mixing with confusion. I don't understand. His nanny quit last week. 5th one in 2 years. They all say the same thing. He's difficult, he doesn't listen, he's angry all the time. Callum's hands clenched on the table. But he's not difficult. He's just hurting. And I don't know how to help him because I'm too busy drowning in my own. He stopped. Took a breath. I need help. Real help. Not another nanny who'll quit in 6 weeks. And you think I? Isla shook her head. I don't have any credentials. I'm not trained in. You love your daughter. Callum gestured at Bryn, who was drawing pictures in the condensation on her water glass. That's more than any credential. You're here working 3 jobs, living in your car, but she's fed and clothed and clearly loved. That's what Bennett needs. Someone who actually cares. I can't. Live-in position. Guest house on the estate. 2 bedrooms, full kitchen. Salary plus room and board. Health insurance. For both of you. Isla stared at him like he'd lost his mind. Maybe he had. Why would you offer this to a complete stranger? Her voice was sharp with disbelief. You don't know anything about me. I could be anyone. I could be dangerous. Are you? No, but. Then what's the problem? The problem is people don't just offer things like this. There's always a catch. Always something they want in return. She was right to be suspicious. The world had taught her that lesson well. Callum leaned forward, holding her gaze. The catch is that I'm desperate. My son is falling apart and I don't know how to stop it. The catch is that I'm asking you to help me be a better father because I clearly can't figure it out on my own. The catch is that I'm not offering charity, I'm asking for help. Something flickered across Isla's face. Understanding, maybe. Or the recognition of shared desperation. I'm not asking for charity either, she said quietly. I'm asking for a job. There's a difference. Exactly. They stared at each other across the table, 2 people drowning in different oceans, recognizing the same look of desperation. 2-week trial, Isla said finally. If it's not working for either of us, I leave. No hard feelings. 2-week trial, Callum agreed. Isla looked down at Bryn, who had fallen asleep in her chair, head pillowed on her arms, exhaustion finally claiming her. The little girl's face was peaceful, full in a way she probably hadn't been in weeks. Okay, Isla whispered. Okay. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of what they'd just agreed to settling over them. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing the city clean. Callum signaled for the check. The waiter brought it quickly, eyes still carefully averted from Isla's damp uniform. Callum added a tip that was probably more than the meal cost and stood. I'll have my car brought around. Give you both a ride to? He paused. Where can I take you tonight? We have my car, Isla said, standing as well. She lifted Bryn carefully and the little girl stirred but didn't wake. We'll be fine. Please. At least let me get you a hotel room for the night. You can move into the guest house tomorrow, but tonight. No. The word was firm. We have our car. We'll be fine. Pride again. He recognized it now, the way she wore it like armor. The same way he wore his wealth. Tomorrow then. Can you meet me at the estate? Say 10 a.m.? Isla hesitated, then nodded. Callum pulled out a business card, wrote his personal address on the back and handed it to her. Their fingers brushed briefly, hers cold from the rain, his warm from the restaurant's heat. Thank you, she said. The words carried more weight than 2 syllables should hold. For tonight. For everything. Thank you, he countered. For saying yes. She looked at him strangely, like she couldn't quite figure him out. Then she turned and walked toward the exit, Bryn's head resting on her shoulder, $3.47 still sitting on the table where she'd left it. Callum picked up the money. Folded it carefully. Put it in his pocket. He watched through the window as Isla carried her daughter to a battered sedan parked down the street. Watched her settle Bryn in the back seat, pulling a thin blanket over her. Watched her climb into the driver's seat and just sit there for a long moment, forehead against the steering wheel. The rain drummed on the roof of her car. She didn't start the engine. Couldn't afford to waste gas running the heater, probably. They would sleep there tonight, cold and cramped, waiting for morning. And tomorrow they would move into his guest house. Into his life. And maybe, they would all find a way to stop drowning. Callum didn't know why he'd done it. Didn't know if it was compassion or desperation or just the first feeling he'd had in 3 years that wasn't grief. Didn't know if he was saving them or if they were saving him. But as he walked out of the restaurant into the rain, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Alive. He didn't know it yet, but that $3.47 was about to cost him everything he thought he knew about life. And for the first time since Vivian died, that didn't terrify him. Have you ever had to choose between pride and survival? Between accepting help and preserving dignity? It's a choice no one should have to make, but one that defines us in ways we never expect. The rain fell harder. Callum turned up his collar and walked toward his car, feeling the weight of the money in his pocket like a promise. Tomorrow everything would change. Tonight, for the first time in 3 years, he allowed himself to hope that maybe, just maybe, that wasn't a bad thing. The iron gates swung open with a whisper of expensive machinery, and Isla's battered sedan coughed its way up the long driveway like an apology. She'd scrubbed it the night before in a gas station parking lot, trying to make it look less like what it was, a home on wheels, a testament to failure. But next to the manicured hedges and perfectly trimmed lawns, it still looked like exactly what it was. Poverty attempting to blend in with wealth. Her hands tightened on the steering wheel. In the rearview mirror, Bryn's face was pressed against the window, eyes wide as they took in the sprawling estate. The main house rose before them, all glass and stone and architectural ambition, looking less like a home and more like a monument to success. Isla's stomach twisted. What was she doing here? Mama, is this where we're going to live? Bryn's voice was small, uncertain, like she was afraid the answer might shatter if spoken too loudly. The guest house, Isla corrected gently, parking near what Callum had described over the phone. Guest house felt like a generous term. The building before them was larger than any apartment she'd ever rented, with its own entrance, windows that actually matched, and a roof that didn't leak promises it couldn't keep. She killed the engine. The sudden silence felt heavy. Remember what we talked about, she said, turning to meet her daughter's eyes. This is temporary. We're here to work. We don't touch anything that isn't ours. We don't ask for more than what's offered. And we're grateful, but we're not. We're not charity cases. Bryn's voice was solemn, repeating the words she'd heard too many times. I know, Mama. The fact that her 7-year-old knew that broke something in Isla every time. Children shouldn't have to learn dignity as defense mechanism before they learned multiplication tables. They climbed out of the car, and Isla immediately felt the weight of being watched. She looked up at the main house and caught movement in an upper window, a boy's face, pale and expressionless, staring down at them. Bennett. He disappeared before she could wave. The front door of the guest house opened, and Callum emerged, dressed more casually than the night before but still carrying that aura of wealth that seemed bred into bones rather than bought. In daylight, she could see the details she'd missed in the restaurant. The silver threading through his dark hair, the lines around his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights, the way he held himself like someone who'd forgotten how to be comfortable in his own skin. You came. He sounded genuinely surprised, like he'd expected her to change her mind. I said I would. Isla lifted their 2 suitcases from the trunk, everything they owned fit into 2 battered pieces of luggage, and tried not to feel ashamed of that fact. Callum moved forward. Let me. We've got it. The words came out sharper than intended. She softened her tone. Thank you. But we can manage. He stepped back, hands falling to his sides, and she saw something flicker across his face. Hurt maybe. Or understanding. It was hard to tell. Bryn clutched her backpack, the one with the broken zipper that Isla kept meaning to fix, and looked between the adults like she was trying to decode a language she didn't quite speak yet. The guest house is fully furnished, Callum said, gesturing toward the door. 2 bedrooms upstairs, kitchen, living area, bathroom. If you need anything else, just... This is more than enough. Isla's throat felt tight. More than enough felt like an understatement bordering on cosmic joke. They followed him inside, and the air that greeted them smelled clean. Not the artificial clean of cheap air freshener trying to mask problems, but the genuine clean of a place that was cared for, maintained, empty of desperation. Bryn's sharp inhale said it all. The living area was bigger than their entire last apartment. Hardwood floors gleamed under soft morning light streaming through windows with actual curtains. Thick, real curtains, not bedsheets taped up for privacy. A couch that looked like it had never known the weight of someone sleeping on it out of necessity. A kitchen with appliances that matched and worked. Counter space. Actual counter space. Mama, Bryn whispered, her small hand finding Isla's. Is this really ours? For now, Isla reminded her gently, the words as much for herself as her daughter. For as long as we're working here. But Bryn was already moving, drawn forward by the gravity of possibility. She wandered through the space with the careful reverence of someone who'd learned not to break beautiful things because they could never be replaced. Her fingers traced the back of the couch, ghosted over the dining table that could actually seat 4 people, paused at the window to stare out at the garden beyond. Then she saw the stairs. Can I? She looked back at Isla, asking permission to hope. Go ahead, baby. Bryn climbed the stairs like she was ascending to heaven, each step deliberate, disbelieving. Isla heard her footsteps overhead, moving from room to room, and then... laughter. Pure, unrestrained, child laughter that Isla hadn't heard in months. The sound of it hit her like a physical blow, beautiful and devastating in equal measure. When had her daughter stopped laughing like that? When had joy become a luxury they couldn't afford? Mama. Mama, come see. There's 2 bedrooms. 2 whole bedrooms. And the beds are so big and there's a window in mine and I can see the garden and... Isla climbed the stairs with her throat burning, Callum following at a respectful distance. She found Bryn in the smaller bedroom, spinning in circles with her arms spread wide, dizzy with happiness. The room was painted a soft yellow. Clean white curtains. A bed with an actual frame and actual mattress sheets that matched. A desk. A lamp. A closet with doors that closed. Bryn collapsed onto the bed, starfishing across it. "It's so soft, Mama. Feel how soft it is." Isla sat on the edge, and the mattress gave beneath her weight in a way that spoke of quality, of comfort, of things she'd stopped letting herself want. She ran her hand over the comforter. No stains, no holes, just clean fabric that smelled like lavender. "Do you like it?" Callum's voice came from the doorway, tentative. Bryn sat up, suddenly remembering herself, remembering the rules about gratitude and not asking for too much. "It's perfect. Thank you so much, Mr. Reed." The formality in her 7-year-old voice made Isla want to cry. "Just Callum," he said gently. "And you're welcome. Both of you." His eyes found Isla's. "I hope you'll be comfortable here." Comfortable. The word felt foreign. Comfort was something other people had, people who didn't count change to buy dinner, who didn't fold their lives into suitcases every few months, who didn't teach their children to be grateful for crumbs because sometimes crumbs were all there was. "It's more than we expected," Isla managed. "Thank you." "Bennett's room is in the main house. Second floor, east wing. I thought maybe this afternoon once you're settled you could." He stopped, a shadow crossing his face. He might not be receptive. At first. I understand. Though she didn't understand what it was like to have everything, money, space, opportunity, and still be so lost you needed a stranger to help you find your own child. "I should let you unpack. Settle in. If you need anything. We'll be fine." The same words she'd been saying for years, the armor she wore so long she'd forgotten what it felt like to take it off. Callum nodded and turned to leave, then paused. "Isla? I meant what I said last night. This isn't charity. You're doing me a favor by being here." She wanted to believe him. Almost did. But belief was another luxury she'd learned to ration carefully. After he left, Isla sank onto the bed beside her daughter and just breathed. Bryn curled against her side, and for a moment they sat in the quiet of their new temporary home, listening to the absence of fear. No landlord pounding on the door. No engine running to keep warm. No calculations about whether they could afford to eat 3 meals today or if 2 would have to suffice. Just quiet. Just safety. Just this moment. "Mama?" Bryn's voice was muffled against her shoulder. "Is this what happy feels like?" The question shattered her. "Yeah, baby," Isla whispered, pressing a kiss to her daughter's hair. "This is what happy feels like. Even if it's only temporary. Even if it can't last. Even if hoping for more is dangerous. For now, this is what happy feels like." Through the window she could see the main house, and in an upper window that pale face watching again. Bennett. The boy who had everything and nothing, just like his father. The boy she was here to help save. She just hoped she knew how. The first week moved like a careful dance between strangers trying not to step on each other's feet. Isla learned the rhythm of the estate quickly, how Callum left for work before dawn, how the cleaning service came Tuesdays and Fridays, how the gardener arrived at 8 and worked until noon with his radio playing soft Spanish music that made her homesick for a version of herself that existed before everything fell apart. She learned that Bryn thrived in the garden, following the gardener, whose name was Miguel and whose patience was infinite, as he explained the difference between annuals and perennials, showing her how to deadhead roses, letting her help water the herbs growing in neat rows near the kitchen. She learned that the main house echoed with absence, every room immaculate and empty, like a museum of a life that used to be lived there. And she learned that Bennett Reed was very, very good at making himself invisible. Their first meeting was brief and brutal. Isla had knocked on his bedroom door that first afternoon, determined to start off right, to bridge whatever gap existed between this angry boy and the help he clearly needed. "Bennett? It's Isla. Your dad asked me to." The door opened. The boy standing there was tall for 10, with his father's sharp features and his mother's dark eyes. At least that's what Isla guessed from the family photos scattered throughout the house. He looked at her with an expression that held more weariness than any child should carry. "Another nanny." His voice was flat, practiced like he'd given this speech before. "Great. This one probably won't last either. I'm not a nanny. You're someone my dad is paying to fix me because he can't be bothered to do it himself." The words were precise, surgical, designed to cut. "So let's skip the part where you pretend to care and get to the part where you realize I'm not worth the salary and quit like all the others." He closed the door before she could respond. She heard the lock click. Heard music turn on, volume high, a wall of sound meant to keep the world out. Isla stood in the hallway, hand still raised to knock again, and felt something crack in her chest. Not for herself, she'd been dismissed by better and worse than a 10-year-old with a trust fund. But for him. For the pain bleeding through his anger, for the abandonment he wore like a second skin. She knew that feeling. Had worn it herself after Damien left. The difference was Bennett's father was still here. Still alive. Still capable of showing up. He just didn't. That first week she watched. Watched Callum leave before Bennett woke for school. Watched him return after Bennett was asleep. Watched the dinner she'd leave on his desk in his study go untouched. The man too consumed by whatever ghosts lived in his computer screen to remember his body needed fuel. She watched Bennett eat breakfast alone, do homework alone, exist in this massive house like a ghost haunting his own life. She watched Bryn try to befriend him. Her daughter had never learned the skill of giving up on people, only to be met with cold indifference or worse, calculated cruelty. "Does your mom know she's a charity case?" Bennett had asked Bryn one morning, voice loud enough for Isla to hear from the kitchen. "That we're only letting you stay here because your dad didn't want you?" Bryn's face had crumpled. Isla had moved before thinking, ready to defend, to correct, to protect. But Bryn had straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin, and said with dignity beyond her years, "My dad left because he's broken inside. That's not my fault. And my mama works 3 jobs to take care of me. What does your dad do?" Bennett had stared at her, something flickering across his face, surprise, recognition, shame, before he'd walked away without answering. Isla had held her daughter tight afterward, pride and heartbreak warring in her chest. Every evening she left dinner on Callum's desk. A note beside it, "Eat something. Please." Every morning the plate would be there, food cold and untouched, note crumpled. She started varying the meals. Comfort foods, mac and cheese, pot roast, things that tasted like someone cared. No change. Healthy options, grilled chicken, steamed vegetables, quinoa. Still nothing. Breakfast for dinner, pancakes, eggs, bacon. The plate returned empty once, but she suspected he'd scraped it into the trash rather than eaten it. On the 5th night she wrote a different note. "Your son eats alone every night. He's learned it from you." The next morning the note was gone. The food still untouched. She wanted to shake him. Wanted to drag him out of his study and make him see what he was doing, what he was losing. But she was an employee, a stranger, someone with no right to comment on how a billionaire raised his child. Except she did have a right. Because she saw what it was doing to Bennett. Saw him withdrawing further, building walls higher, convincing himself that love was something other people deserved but not him. On the 7th night she found him. It was past midnight. She'd been unable to sleep, kept awake by the unfamiliarity of comfort, the strangeness of having a room with a door that locked from the inside rather than the outside. She'd gone outside for air and found Bennett in the garden, sitting beneath an old oak tree with his knees pulled to his chest. He was crying. Trying not to, shoulders shaking with the effort of staying silent, but crying nonetheless. Isla's first instinct was to approach, to comfort. But she remembered his face when he'd opened his bedroom door, that practiced disdain, that armor of indifference. She remembered being that age, that hurt, that certain that adults were just liars waiting to prove themselves. So she didn't approach. She just sat down a few feet away back against the tree and looked up at the stars. They sat in silence for a long time. Bennett's breathing eventually steadied, but he didn't move. Didn't acknowledge her presence. Didn't tell her to leave. Finally, his voice came out small and broken. "He doesn't even see me anymore." Isla didn't pretend not to know who he meant. "Sometimes people who are hurting forget how to see anything but their own pain," she said quietly. Not an excuse. Just a truth. Bennett turned to look at her, and in the moonlight his face was so young, so lost. "Is that why you work so much too?" The question hit like a punch. She'd thought she'd been subtle, thought she'd hidden the way she filled every moment with tasks and duties, anything to avoid sitting still with her own failures. "Yes," she admitted. Because lying to children who'd already been lied to enough felt like another betrayal. Sometimes it's easier to stay busy than to think about all the ways you failed. But you didn't fail. Bennett's voice rose with sudden intensity. "You're here. You take care of Bryn. You make her breakfast and help with her homework and you're there. That's not failing. Your dad's here too." "No, he's not." The words were hollow. "He's in that house but he's not here. He hasn't been here since Mom died. Vivian." The name no one spoke but everyone thought about. The ghost that haunted every room, every silence, every moment Callum chose work over life. He loved her, Bennett continued, voice breaking. He loved her so much. And when she died it was like he died too. But he forgot that I didn't. That I'm still here. That I still need him. Isla's eyes burned. She wanted to argue, to defend, to say that Callum loved his son even if he couldn't show it. But she'd spent a week watching and she couldn't find evidence to support that claim. What do you need? She asked instead. Bennett looked at her like no one had asked him that in years. Maybe no one had. I need him to have dinner with me. Just once. I need him to ask about school. I need him to. His voice cracked. I need him to see me. Really see me. Not just the problem I am, but me. Simple requests. Devastating in their simplicity. He's drowning, Isla said softly. In grief, in guilt, in everything he can't control. And when people are drowning, they sometimes drag down everyone around them without meaning to. Are you drowning too? Bennett asked. Every day. The admission surprised her, but it felt true. Every single day. But I have Bryn to keep swimming for. Your dad. She chose her words carefully. I think he forgot what he was swimming for. They sat together in the garden, two people treading water in different oceans, until Bennett's breathing evened and he fell asleep against the tree. Isla covered him with her jacket and went inside to get Callum. She found him in his study, staring at his computer screen with eyes that saw nothing. Your son is asleep in the garden, she said from the doorway. Callum's head snapped up, finally focusing. What? Why is he? Because he's 10 and in pain and no one sees it. She kept her voice level, professional. He needs to be carried to bed. Callum stood quickly, moving toward the door, then stopped. Will you? No. Isla stepped aside. He needs you to do it. Something flickered across Callum's face. Fear, maybe, or the recognition of a responsibility he'd been avoiding. But he nodded and went outside. Isla watched from the window as Callum approached his son, saw him kneel beside Bennett, saw his hand hover uncertainly before finally, gently, brushing the hair from the boy's forehead. She saw him lift Bennett, still so small despite his height, and carry him toward the house. And she saw Bennett's arms, still asleep, wrap around his father's neck and hold on. It was a start. Small. Fragile. Barely there. But a start. The call came during Bennett's math class on a Tuesday afternoon. Ms. Moreno? This is Principal Davidson from Ridgemont Academy. There's been an incident involving Bennett Reed, and we need a parent or guardian to come collect him immediately. Isla's heart dropped. What kind of incident? There was a physical altercation. Bennett is suspended for 3 days pending investigation. Can you come? Callum was in meetings. She'd heard him on the phone that morning, schedule packed, nothing could be moved. She tried his cell anyway, straight to voicemail. His office, assistant said he was unavailable. Of course he was. I'll be there in 20 minutes, Isla said, already grabbing her keys. The drive to the school felt eternal. Questions spiraled through her mind. Was Bennett hurt? Had he hurt someone? What had happened? Where was Callum? She found Bennett in the principal's office, sitting in a chair with his arms crossed and his jaw set, sporting a split lip and the beginnings of a black eye. Fury radiated off him in waves. Ms. Moreno. Principal Davidson was a thin woman with steel-gray hair and an expression that suggested she'd seen it all. Thank you for coming. As I explained on the phone, Bennett was involved in a fight with another student during lunch. There were witnesses, and while the other boys started the altercation verbally, Bennett threw the first punch. He called Lucy a freak, Bennett said through gritted teeth. He said she was weird and gross and no one wanted to sit with her because she smells. Language that is certainly unacceptable, the principal agreed. But physical violence is not the appropriate response. We have a zero-tolerance policy. Lucy has autism, Bennett continued, voice rising. She can't always help if her clothes aren't perfect or if she stims in ways people think are weird. And Marcus knows that. He was being cruel on purpose and someone needed to stop him. By punching him? The principal asked. By making him understand that words hurt. Bennett's hands clenched into fists. Someone needed to defend her. Isla saw it then, the pain beneath the anger. Bennett hadn't been fighting out of cruelty or lack of control. He'd been fighting because he knew what it felt like to be invisible, to be dismissed, to need someone to stand up for him. I'll take him home, Isla said quietly. And we'll discuss appropriate ways to handle these situations in the future. The principal nodded, clearly relieved to have the situation resolved. 3-day suspension. He can return on Friday. In the car, Bennett stared out the window, jaw still set, refusing to speak. Isla let the silence stretch for 5 minutes before she said, Does it hurt? I'm fine. Your eye is swelling. We should put ice on it. I said I'm fine. More silence. Isla navigated through afternoon traffic, weighing her options. Finally, she pulled into a parking lot and cut the engine. What are we? I'm not driving while we have this conversation. Bennett's jaw tightened further. There's nothing to talk about. I got in a fight. I'm suspended. My dad's going to be pissed when he finds out, which he probably won't for another 3 days because he won't notice I'm not at school anyway. I called him. And he said he was busy. He's in meetings. He's always in meetings. Bennett's voice cracked. Always has something more important than me. Bennett? Why did you even come? The question exploded out of him. Why did you pick me up? You're not my mom. You're just some woman my dad is paying to babysit me because he can't be bothered. You're right. Isla's voice was steady but fierce. I'm not your mom. But I'm here. And right now that's more than your dad can say. Bennett stared at her, something flickering behind the anger. Longing for someone to see him. He misses your mom, Isla continued gently. And grief makes people forget things. Important things. Like the fact that their son needs them. I don't need him. The words were automatic, a lie told so many times it had started to feel true. Yes, you do. And it's okay to need people. It's okay to be angry that they're not there when you need them. Bennett's breath hitched. The dam cracked. He wasn't even there when she died, he whispered. He was at work. Always at work. And she was asking for him and he didn't come and then she was just gone. And he didn't even cry. He just went back to work. Like she didn't matter. Like we didn't matter. Isla's heart broke. Oh, Bennett. Everyone keeps saying he's grieving, he's processing, he needs time. It's been 3 years. When does he get to be my dad again? The question hung in the air, unanswerable. I don't know, Isla admitted. But I know you deserve better than this. And I know defending Lucy was brave, even if hitting Marcus wasn't the right way to do it. I couldn't just let him bully her. Someone had to. His voice broke completely. Isla unbuckled her seatbelt and reached across the console. Come here. For a moment, Bennett stayed frozen. Then, like a dam breaking, he collapsed against her, sobbing. Great, heaving sobs that shook his whole body. Years of grief and abandonment and loneliness pouring out in the front seat of her battered sedan. Isla held him, one hand on his back, the other stroking his hair, whispering the things she wished someone had told her when she was falling apart. It's okay. You're allowed to hurt. You're not alone. I see you. They sat like that until Bennett's breathing steadied, until the sobs faded to shudders, until he pulled back with red-rimmed eyes and said, Sorry. Don't apologize for feeling things. He nodded, wiping his face with his sleeve. Are you going to tell my dad? Yes. His expression shuddered again. He won't care. Then we'll make him care. Something like hope flickered across Bennett's face. How? Isla started the car. By not letting him hide anymore. Callum's car was in the driveway when they returned. Isla's stomach tightened. Good. Let him face this. Let him see what his absence was doing. Bennett saw the car too and tensed. Maybe I should just go to my room. No. Isla's voice was firm. You're going to go inside, put ice on that eye, and wait for your father to talk to you. He's going to yell. Maybe. But you're going to stand there and take it because that's what happens when you make choices. Even brave choices have consequences. They found Callum in the main house, pacing his study with his phone pressed to his ear, mid-sentence in what sounded like a business call. He looked up when they entered, eyes widening at Bennett's face. I'll call you back, he said abruptly, ending the call. What happened? Fight at school, Bennett muttered. What? Callum's voice rose. You got in a fight? Why would you? He was defending a classmate from a bully, Isla interjected. And he's suspended for 3 days. Callum's gaze snapped to her. I asked him. And he answered. Now I'm giving you context. The air between them crackled with tension. Callum's jaw set. Bennett, go to your room? No, Isla said. Both males stared at her. Excuse me? Callum's voice was dangerously quiet. He's not going anywhere until you actually talk to him. Not at him. To him. This is not your place. Then whose place is it? Because you haven't been here. You haven't seen him struggling. You haven't. You don't understand. I understand you're drowning him in money because you can't face giving him what he actually needs. Isla's voice was steady despite her racing heart. You. The word hung in the air like an accusation. Callum's face went pale, then flushed. You have no right. When was the last time you asked your son how he's doing? When was the last time you ate dinner with him? When was the last time you were actually present in his life instead of just paying people to fill the gaps? I am doing my best. Your best. Isla's voice cracked. Your best is leaving breakfast on his desk untouched? Your best is coming home after he's asleep and leaving before he's awake? Your best is making him believe he's not worth your time? Stop. Bennett's voice was small, breaking. Please stop. Both adults turned to him. Tears streaked down his face. It's fine, Bennett continued, voice shaking. It's fine. I'm used to it. He doesn't have to. It's not fine, Isla said fiercely. You deserve better than fine. She's right. The words came from Callum, barely audible. He was staring at his son with an expression of dawning horror. You do. You deserve so much better than what I've been giving you. Bennett looked at his father like he was speaking another language. Callum took a step forward, hands hanging uselessly at his sides. I'm sorry. God, Bennett, I'm so sorry. I couldn't. He stopped, swallowed hard. Your mother asked me to promise not to let work steal me from life. And I broke that promise. I broke it long before she died, and I've been breaking it every day since. Then why? Bennett's voice cracked. Why can't you just stop? Because if I stop working, I have to feel everything. And if I feel everything, I'm afraid I won't survive it. The admission hung in the air, raw and honest. But you're not surviving anyway, Bennett whispered. You're just existing. And making me exist too. And I can't do this anymore, Dad. I can't keep being invisible. Something in Callum shattered. Isla saw it happen, saw the walls he'd built crumble, saw the grief he'd been holding back crash through. He sank into his chair, head in his hands, shoulders shaking. I don't know how to do this without her, he said, voice muffled. I don't know how to be your father without her here to remind me how. You just show up, Bennett said, crying now too. That's all. You just show up. Isla backed toward the door, giving them space. But before she left, she caught Callum's eye. He needs you, she said quietly. Not your money. Not your guilt. Just you. She walked out, closing the door behind her, and pressed her back against the wall in the hallway. Her hands were shaking. She'd overstepped. Massively. Callum would probably fire her. They'd be back in the car, back to counting change, back to... The door opened. Callum stood there, eyes red, face raw. Thank you, he said hoarsely. For saying what I needed to hear. Not what I wanted to hear. Isla nodded, not trusting her voice. I'm going to do better, Callum continued. I don't know how yet, but I'm going to figure it out. Starting now. Good, Isla managed. He went back inside and Isla heard their voices, quiet, halting but talking. Actually talking. She walked back to the guest house, legs weak, and found Bryn in the garden with Miguel, examining a caterpillar on a leaf. Mama? Bryn ran over. Look. Miguel says it's going to turn into a butterfly. Isla pulled her daughter close, breathing in the scent of sunshine and soil and hope. Sometimes transformation required breaking first. Would you have the courage to speak truth to someone in power, knowing it might cost you everything? Sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same thing. Callum couldn't sleep. It was 3 a.m. and he was sitting in the dark of his study, photo album open on his lap. Pictures he hadn't looked at in years stared up at him, accusatory in their happiness. Vivian, pregnant with Bennett, glowing. Vivian in the hospital, holding their newborn son with tears streaming down her face. Bennett's first birthday. Bennett's first day of school. Camping trip when Bennett was 6. Halloween when he was 7. Callum present in all of them. Smiling. Engaged. Alive. When had he stopped being that person? He knew the answer. Could pinpoint it to the day, the hour, the moment. The day Vivian had taken his hand, weak from chemotherapy, and said, Cal, promise me. Promise me you won't let work steal you from life. Promise me you'll be there for Bennett. Really there. You're going to be fine, he'd said, lying to her, lying to himself. We're going to beat this. Promise me anyway. I promise. She died 3 days later while he was in a board meeting he'd convinced himself he couldn't miss. The call had come and he'd left mid-presentation, but by the time he arrived she was gone. Bennett sitting beside her bed, holding her hand, sobbing. Callum had stood in the doorway, frozen. Useless. Too late. She'd asked for him. The nurse had told him later, gently. She kept saying your name. She wanted to see you one more time. He'd failed her. Failed Bennett. Failed himself. And instead of facing that failure, he buried himself in work. Meetings, mergers, problems he could solve. Anything to avoid the crushing weight of everything he couldn't fix. He'd broken his promise. Every single day for 3 years. Vivian's voice echoed in his memory, words she'd said years before the cancer. You know what the tragedy of success is, Cal? It's realizing you climbed the ladder but leaned it against the wrong wall. He'd climbed so high. Built an empire. Accumulated wealth beyond measure. And lost everything that mattered. Bennett's words from earlier gutted him. I can't keep being invisible. His son. His beautiful, hurting son who'd grown from 7 to 10 without him really seeing it. Who'd learned to eat alone, to cope alone, to exist in the shadows of his father's grief. Callum closed the photo album and made a decision. Tomorrow everything would change. Not gradually. Not eventually. Tomorrow. He pulled out his phone and sent an email to his assistant. Cancel all meetings for tomorrow. Personal emergency. Reschedule everything. The response came within minutes. His assistant apparently also awake at 3 a.m. Done. Is everything okay? He stared at the question. Was everything okay? No. But it would be. He'd make sure of it. He typed back, it will be. Thank you. Then he did something he hadn't done in 3 years. He walked upstairs to Bennett's room and stood outside the door, hand raised to knock, heart hammering. What if Bennett didn't want to see him? What if he pushed too far, stayed away too long, broken something that couldn't be fixed? But Isla's words echoed, you just show up. That's all. You just show up. So he opened the door quietly. Bennett was asleep, curled on his side, face still showing traces of tears. The black eye had darkened, a visible reminder of Callum's absence. If his son was defending classmates from bullies, who was defending him? Callum sat carefully on the edge of the bed. Bennett stirred but didn't wake. I'm sorry, Callum whispered into the darkness. I'm so sorry, buddy. I failed you. I failed your mom. But I'm going to do better. I swear. Starting tomorrow. Bennett's breathing stayed even, peaceful in sleep. Callum reached out, gently brushed the hair from his son's forehead the way he used to when Bennett was small. The way Vivian always did. The gesture felt foreign and familiar all at once. I love you, he said. Words he hadn't spoken aloud in months. I love you so much. And I'm not going to let you be invisible anymore. He sat there for a long time watching his son sleep, letting the reality of how much time he'd lost sink in. Then he stood, tucked the blanket around Bennett's shoulders and went back downstairs. He had a day to plan. Morning light filtered through Bennett's curtains and consciousness returned slowly. For a moment, everything felt normal. Same room, same silence, same expectations of another day navigating his father's absence. Then he remembered yesterday. The fight. The suspension. Isla confronting his dad. The conversation that followed, raw and painful and somehow hopeful? He rolled over, wincing as his black eye protested, and saw something on his nightstand that made him freeze. A note written in his father's handwriting. Don't make plans today. We're spending it together. Just us. I promise. Dad. Bennett stared at the paper like it might disappear if he blinked too hard. His father had been in his room. Had left a note. Was promising time together. His chest tightened with something dangerous. Oh. He'd been disappointed before. So many times. Promises made and broken, plans cancelled for meetings, moments when his father's attention drifted even when he was physically present. But something about yesterday felt different. The way his dad had looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in years. The way his voice had broken when he'd admitted he was failing. Maybe this time. Bennett got dressed quickly, pulling on jeans and his favorite hoodie, the blue one his mom had bought him before she got sick. He could still remember her in the store holding it up saying, "This matches your eyes, sweetheart. You'll be so handsome." He rarely wore it. Couldn't stand the memories it carried. But today felt like a day for bravery. He found his father in the kitchen. Actually in the kitchen, not his study. Callum stood at the counter with 2 plates of pancakes, slightly burnt around the edges but recognizably pancakes, and an expression that held equal parts determination and anxiety. I made breakfast, Callum said, gesturing at the plates like he was presenting evidence in a trial. Or I tried. I think I remembered the recipe right, but... Bennett stared. His father had made breakfast. Actual food with his actual hands in the actual kitchen. This hadn't happened since before his mom died. It's probably terrible, Callum continued, misreading Bennett's silence. We can order something if... No. Bennett's voice came out rough. This is good. They sat at the kitchen island, not the formal dining room where they'd eaten on holidays with his mom, but the casual space where she used to make them breakfast on Saturday mornings while still in her pajamas, laughing as she flipped pancakes too high and occasionally catching them. The memory hurt. But it was a good hurt. The kind that reminded you something beautiful had existed even if it was gone. Callum cut his pancake carefully like he was performing surgery. I thought maybe we could do something today. Whatever you want. Arcade movies, sports. Really? Bennett couldn't keep the disbelief from his voice. What about work? I cancelled everything. Everything? Everything. Callum met his eyes. You're more important. The words hit like a physical blow. When was the last time he'd felt important to anyone other than Isla and Bryn? What if something urgent comes up? Bennett tested, waiting for the qualifier, the escape clause. Then they'll handle it without me. Or it'll wait. Callum's voice was firm. Today is yours. Completely. Bennett took a bite of pancake to hide the fact that his eyes were stinging. It was slightly burnt and unevenly cooked and absolutely perfect. Can we go to the arcade? He asked quietly. The one on 5th Street? The one with all the vintage games? Bennett nodded. His mom used to take him there when he was younger. She'd loved the old school games, claimed they were better than anything modern. Pac-Man and Galaga and Donkey Kong. She'd competed with him, laughing when she lost, celebrating when she won, making everything feel like an adventure. He hadn't been back since she died. Too many memories. Too much absence. Perfect, Callum said. Let's go. The arcade was exactly as Bennett remembered. Dim lighting, carpet that had seen better decades, the electronic symphony of 100 games all competing for attention. The smell of popcorn and nostalgia. Bennett stood just inside the entrance, overwhelmed by memory. His mother's laugh echoing through this exact space. Her hand in his as they ran from game to game. The way she'd crouch beside him, pointing at the screen, giving terrible advice that somehow always made him better. You okay? Callum's hand touched his shoulder gently. Bennett nodded, not trusting his voice. They exchanged money for tokens, an absurd amount, Callum getting a bucket that would probably last them weeks, and stood surveying the options. Where do we start? Callum asked. Bennett pointed at Pac-Man. His mom's favorite. They squeezed into the machine together, shoulders touching, and Callum fed in the tokens. The familiar music started, yellow mouth moving across the screen, ghosts giving chase. Callum played first and he was terrible. Magnificently, hilariously terrible. He got caught by the first ghost within 30 seconds, jerked the joystick the wrong direction trying to escape the second, and died completely within a minute. I forgot how hard this is, he muttered. You're supposed to plan ahead, Bennett said, something loosening in his chest. Watch the patterns. Show me. Bennett took over and muscle memory kicked in. His mom had taught him this game, spent hours helping him master the patterns, learn the ghost movements, find the rhythm. He cleared the first level easily, then the second. Callum watched and Bennett could feel his father's attention. Real attention, not the distracted half-presence he'd grown used to. It felt foreign and wonderful and terrifying all at once. You're good at this, Callum said. Mom taught me. The words came out before Bennett could stop them. Silence. Then, she loved this place. Yeah. Bennett's voice was thick. We used to come every Saturday. Before the cancer. Before the hospitals. Before everything fell apart. I should have come with you, Callum said quietly. I was always working. Always too busy. And I missed so much. Bennett's avatar got caught by a ghost, distracted by the conversation. Game over. Do you want to try again? Callum asked. Bennett shook his head. Different game. They moved through the arcade trying everything. Air hockey, where Callum was surprisingly competitive and Bennett discovered he liked winning more than he'd expected. Basketball hoops, where they were both terrible but laughed until their sides hurt. Racing games, where Bennett's youth gave him faster reflexes but Callum's strategy sometimes evened the odds. With each game the awkwardness between them eased. The years of distance didn't disappear, they were still there, a gulf that would take time to bridge, but they became less insurmountable. Less permanent. At a shooting game Bennett asked, why now? Callum didn't pretend to misunderstand. Because Isla made me see what I was doing. What I was losing. And because I'm tired of being half alive. You miss her. Not a question. Every second of every day. Callum's voice was raw. Your mom she was everything. And when she died, I didn't know how to keep living without her. But you didn't die, Bennett said, shooting at pixelated zombies with more force than necessary. You just stopped living. And you made me stop too. The words hung between them, honest and cutting. You're right, Callum said. And I'm sorry. I can't change the last 3 years. But I can change today. And tomorrow. And every day after that. Bennett's avatar died on screen, overrun by zombies. He didn't restart the game. Instead, he turned to face his father fully. Do you promise? Because you've promised before. And then something always comes up. Some meeting or deal or emergency that's more important. Nothing is more important than you. Callum's voice was firm, eyes direct. Nothing. And if I forget that, when I forget that, because I probably will sometimes, I need you to remind me. Okay. Don't let me disappear again. Okay, Bennett whispered. They stood in the middle of the arcade, surrounded by noise and lights and strangers, and something fundamental shifted between them. Not healed. Healing would take time, would require consistency, would need proof through actions rather than words. But beginning. Callum held out his hand. Come on. I saw a skee-ball machine earlier and I bet I can beat you. Bennett took his hand. When was the last time they'd held hands? And felt something crack open in his chest. Not breaking. Opening. Making room for possibility. You're going to lose, he said. Probably, Callum agreed. But I'm going to try anyway. They played skee-ball and Callum did lose badly. Bennett collected more tickets than he knew what to do with. At the prize counter, surrounded by cheap toys and candy, Bennett spotted a small stuffed bear wearing a blue hoodie. That one, he said, pointing. The attendant exchanged his tickets and handed over the bear. It was worn around the edges, probably been sitting there for years, but Bennett held it carefully. For Bryn, he explained when his father looked curious. She helped me. The other night. When I said something mean about her mom. Callum smiled, a real smile, the first Bennett had seen in years. That's kind of you. She's kind, Bennett said simply. And Isla, she's been good to me. Even when I was awful to her. She cares about you. She barely knows me. Sometimes people see us more clearly when they're not carrying years of history. Callum's voice was thoughtful. Maybe that's what we both needed. Someone from outside to show us what we'd stopped seeing. They left the arcade as the afternoon sun slanted golden through the streets. Bennett clutched the stuffed bear and felt lighter than he had in months. Years maybe. In the car on the way home, Callum said, "Same time next week?" Bennett's heart jumped. Really? Really? Every week. I promise. No cancellations, no excuses. This is ours. Okay. Bennett tried to keep the hope from his voice, failed completely. Can we try the go-kart place next time? Absolutely. I'll probably crash into everything, but absolutely. They drove in comfortable silence, and Bennett watched the city pass by through the window. Everything looked the same as it always did, but somehow different. Brighter maybe. More full of possibility. When they pulled into the estate driveway, Bennett saw Isla in the garden with Bryn, both of them kneeling in the dirt, planting something. Isla looked up, caught sight of them, and smiled. Bennett held up the stuffed bear through the window, and even from this distance he could see Bryn's face light up. Can I go show her? He asked. Go ahead. Bennett grabbed the bear and ran across the lawn, and Callum watched through the windshield as his son, his isolated, angry, invisible son, knelt in the dirt beside Bryn and presented her with the toy. Watched Bryn's squeal of delight, her immediate hug. Watched Isla's hand find Bennett's shoulder, squeeze gently, her expression saying everything she couldn't out loud. I'm proud of you. And he watched Bennett smile. Actually smile. The expression transforming his face from hard edges to something soft and young and hopeful. When was the last time he'd seen his son smile like that? Callum got out of the car slowly, and Isla's eyes met his across the garden. She didn't say anything, but her slight nod conveyed understanding. Approval. Recognition that something had shifted. He walked over and Bennett looked up. Dad did good today. The simple statement, delivered to Isla like a report, made Callum's throat tight. I'm glad, Isla said warmly. Then to Callum, we're planting tomatoes. Miguel says they'll be ready by summer. Summer. Callum let the word settle. 3 months away. The future. Something to look forward to be present for. That sounds perfect. Bryn held up the bear. Look what Bennett got me. His name is Blue because of his hoodie, and Bennett said he's brave. Very brave, Isla agreed, meeting Bennett's eyes with understanding. They sat in the garden together, the four of them, as afternoon faded toward evening. Callum couldn't remember the last time he just sat outside, doing nothing, being present. Probably before Vivian died. Probably before he'd convinced himself that stillness was dangerous, that feeling was fatal. But here, with dirt under his fingernails and his son's shoulder pressed against his and the sound of children's laughter filling air that had been silent too long, here he felt something he'd thought was lost forever. It wouldn't last perfectly. There would be setbacks, days when work pulled at him, moments when grief crushed the breath from his lungs. Healing wasn't linear. Change wasn't instant. But as Bennett leaned against him, tired from the day, trust slowly rebuilding, as Isla caught his eye and smiled like she believed in him, Callum allowed himself to believe it was possible. Just as Callum started to heal, the past came knocking, and it wanted something. The man at the gate arrived on a Thursday afternoon, 3 days after the arcade trip. Isla was in the kitchen making lunch when the security system buzzed. She glanced at the monitor and saw an unfamiliar car. Expensive. A man in the driver's seat, well-dressed, handsome in a calculated way. He was speaking to the intercom, his smile practiced and charming. Something cold slid down her spine. She knew that smile. Had fallen for that smile once, a lifetime ago. Had believed the promises that came with it until they'd crumbled like everything else. No, it couldn't be. But when she looked closer at the monitor, when she saw his face clearly for the first time in 4 years, her knees went weak. Damien. Her ex-husband. Bryn's father. The man who'd walked out when their daughter was 3, claiming he needed to find himself, leaving them with nothing but broken promises and an eviction notice 2 months later. What was he doing here? How did he even know where they were? Her hands started shaking. She pressed them flat against the counter, forcing herself to breathe. Mama? Bryn appeared in the doorway, Blue the bear tucked under her arm. Who's at the gate? No one, baby. Just, stay here, okay? But, stay here. The words came out sharper than intended. Bryn's face crumpled, and Isla immediately regretted her tone. I'm sorry. I just need you to stay inside while I handle something. Can you do that for me? Bryn nodded, uncertain, and Isla forced a smile before heading toward the gate. She could see him better now through the iron bars. 4 years had been kind to him, or maybe money had. He looked healthy, well-fed, put together in ways he never had when they were married. The borrowed suit she'd assumed at first glance might actually be his. How was that possible? He saw her approaching and his smile widened. Isla. God, you look good. She wanted to throw up. What are you doing here? That's how you greet me? After all this time? He leaned against his car. New luxury, another impossibility. I've missed you. Missed our daughter. You don't get to miss her. Isla's voice was ice. You walked away. You chose to leave. I made a mistake. His expression shifted to what he probably thought was contrition. People change, Isla. I've changed. I want to make this right. Make what right? 4 years of abandonment? 4 years of not a single phone call, not a single dollar of support, not even a birthday card. I was going through things. I wasn't in a place to be a good father. And you think you are now? Isla laughed, the sound bitter. What changed, Damien? Did you suddenly remember you had a daughter? Or did you hear about? She stopped. Looked at his expensive clothes, his new car, the calculation in his eyes. You heard about Callum? She said slowly. Someone told you I was working for a billionaire. That's why you're here. Damien's smile slipped for just a second before reassembling. That's not fair. I've been looking for you for months. Liar. The word came out flat, certain. If you'd been looking, you would have found us in the car we were living in. You would have found us at the shelter where we stayed for a week last winter. You would have found us. You were living in your car? For a moment, genuine shock crossed his face. Then calculation returned. See? This is exactly why I need to be involved. Bryn deserves better than that. Bryn deserves a father who doesn't abandon her. Isla's hands clenched into fists. And you're 4 years too late. I have rights, Isla. Legal rights. I'm her father. You're a sperm donor who walked away. That's all you are. Damien's expression hardened. I've changed. I'm stable now. Employed. Ready to be a parent. And if you won't let me see my daughter voluntarily, I'll get the courts involved. Ice flooded Isla's veins. You wouldn't. I don't want to. But I will. I want to be part of Bryn's life. You want money. The pieces fell into place. You heard I was working for someone wealthy and you think you can get child support. Or a settlement. Or something. That's what this is. That's not. Get out. Isla's voice shook with fury. Get out and don't come back. You lost your rights to her when you walked away. Actually, legally, I didn't. And courts favor parents who want to be involved. Damien straightened, the mask of contrition falling away to reveal cold calculation beneath. I've been clean for 2 years. Employed for 18 months. I can prove I'm stable. Can you? Can you prove that living here? He gestured at the estate behind her. With a man you barely know is stable? The threat was clear. Oh, I see. Damien's smile returned, cruel now. You found yourself a rich boyfriend. Moved yourself in. Guess our daughter wasn't enough for you after all, was she? The slap happened before Isla could think. Her palm connected with his cheek, the sound sharp in the quiet afternoon. Damien's head snapped to the side. When he looked back he was smiling. That's assault, he said conversationally. Witnesses could be problematic for you in a custody hearing. There won't be a custody hearing. Won't there? He opened his car door. See you in court, Isla. Tell Bryn her daddy says hello. He drove away and Isla stood at the gate until his car disappeared from sight. Then her legs gave out and she sank to the ground, shaking. This couldn't be happening. Not now. Not when things were finally stable, finally safe. Not when Bryn was finally happy, finally sleeping through the night without nightmares, finally believing the world could be kind. She didn't know how long she sat there before she heard footsteps. Looked up to find Callum approaching, concern etched across his face. The security system sent an alert, he said. Who was that? Isla opened her mouth. Closed it. The words stuck in her throat, tangled with fear and fury and desperation. My ex-husband, she finally managed. Bryn's father. Callum's expression shifted. The one who left? He wants custody. Or money. Or both. I don't. Her voice cracked. I don't know what to do. Callum knelt beside her, and she saw determination settle over his features. We fight him. We. You think I'm letting him take Bryn? After everything? Callum's voice was firm. Not a chance. Callum, you don't understand. Courts favor biological parents, especially fathers who reform. I'm still broke. Still working multiple jobs. Not anymore. You're employed here. Full-time. With benefits and stability and... But he'll say I'm living with a man I barely know. He'll say it's inappropriate. He'll say, Isla's breath came too fast, panic clawing at her chest. He'll say I'm unfit. That Bryn deserves better. And maybe he's right. Maybe... Stop. Callum's hands found her shoulders, steadying. He's not right. He's a man who abandoned his child and only came back when he smelled money. Any judge worth their position will see that. You don't know that. You don't know how these things work. The system isn't fair. It favors people who look good on paper and he looks good now. Somehow he has money and stability and we'll get you a lawyer. The best lawyer. We'll fight this. Why? The question burst out of her, desperate. Why would you do this? Why would you involve yourself in my mess? Callum met her eyes and something in his expression made her breath catch. Because you did it for Bennett, he said quietly. Because you stood up to me when I needed someone to. Because you've made this house feel like a home again. He paused. Because you've made me remember what it feels like to care about something other than work. The air between them felt charged, heavy with things unsaid. I can't ask you to, Isla started. You didn't ask. I'm offering. The same words he'd said in the restaurant a lifetime ago. Words that had changed everything. Callum. Isla. His voice was gentle but firm. Let me help. Please. She wanted to refuse. Wanted to maintain her independence, her pride, her ability to handle things alone. But she was so tired. So scared. And the thought of losing Bryn, of courts and lawyers and Damien's calculated smile, made her want to collapse. Okay, she whispered. Okay. They sat together at the gate, afternoon sun stretching shadows long across the driveway. Inside the guest house, Bryn was safe, unaware that her father had returned. Unaware that everything might change. Isla's hand rested on the ground between them. Callum's hand moved closer, hesitant, until their fingers were almost touching. Not quite. But almost. The space between them hummed with possibility and danger in equal measure. We'll figure this out, Callum said. Isla wanted to believe him. Tried to let his certainty steady her spinning world. But Damien's words echoed in her mind. See you in court. And she knew, felt it with bone-deep certainty, that this fight was just beginning. When someone fights for you not because they have to but because they choose to, that changes everything, doesn't it? But sometimes the greatest battles aren't won with money or power. Sometimes they're won with something simpler. Something harder to find. Belief that you're worth fighting for. Inside the guest house, Bryn pressed her face to the window, watching her mother and Callum sitting together. Blue the bear was clutched in her arms and she whispered to him, I think everything's going to be okay. If only she knew how much would have to break before it could be put back together. The headline appeared first on a gossip website Isla had never heard of, then spread like wildfire across social media. By Monday morning it was everywhere. Billionaire's live-in lover, single mom gold digger lands tech mogul. Isla stared at her phone screen, the words blurring as her hands shook. Beneath the headline were photos. Her and Callum in the garden, laughing. Her and Callum at the gate, his hand on her shoulder. Her and Callum through the window of the main house, heads close together as they talked. Innocent moments, twisted into something ugly. The article painted her as a calculating seductress who'd manipulated her way into Callum's life and wallet. It claimed she'd deliberately gotten herself rescued at the restaurant, that she'd used Bryn as bait, that she was living in luxury while hard-working people struggled. Comments poured in by the thousands. Most were vicious. Another woman using her kid to trap a rich man. She's probably been planning this for months. Feels sorry for his real family having to deal with this trash. Gold Digger 101. Find a lonely rich guy and play the victim. Isla's vision swam. She set the phone down before she dropped it, pressed her palms flat against the kitchen counter, tried to remember how to breathe. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. But her phone kept buzzing. More notifications. More articles. More photos somehow obtained from security cameras, from neighbors, from people she'd never met but who felt entitled to judge her entire existence based on a headline. Mama? Bryn stood in the doorway, blew the bear under one arm, backpack ready for school. Her daughter's face was innocent, unknowing, still safe in the bubble Isla had tried so desperately to maintain. Morning, baby. Isla's voice came out steadier than she felt. Ready for school? Are you okay? You look sad. I'm fine. Just tired. The lie tasted bitter. Go brush your teeth one more time, okay? Bryn hesitated, then nodded and disappeared upstairs. The moment she was gone, Isla's phone rang. Unknown number. She let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately. Different number. Again. And again. Reporters. Had to be. Her hands found her phone, opened the article again. Kept reading even though every word felt like a knife. The piece quoted anonymous sources close to Reed, suggesting Isla had a history of targeting wealthy men. It implied she'd deliberately gotten evicted to create a sob story. It questioned whether Bryn was even really her daughter or if she'd borrowed someone's child for sympathy. That last part made something crack inside her chest. They were questioning her motherhood. Her love for Bryn. The one thing, the only thing she'd never failed at. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. How much is Reed paying you to sleep with him? Then another, your daughter must be so proud. And another, trash raising trash. Isla dropped the phone like it had burned her. Backed away from the counter. Her breath came too fast, shallow, panic clawing up her throat. 7 years. 7 years of working herself to exhaustion, of sacrificing everything, of fighting to give Bryn a decent life. 7 years of maintaining her dignity even when the world tried to strip it away. And now this. Public humiliation. Her name dragged through mud by strangers who knew nothing about her but felt entitled to destroy her anyway. Isla. She spun to find Callum in the doorway, concern etched across his face. He was holding his own phone, jaw tight with fury. I've seen it, she said before he could speak. All of it. My lawyers are already working on takedown notices. Most of these sites will remove. It doesn't matter. Her voice was hollow. The damage is done. People have already seen it. Already decided who I am. They're wrong. Are they? The question burst out of her, desperate. Maybe they're right. Maybe I am just some woman who took advantage of your kindness. Maybe. Stop. Callum crossed the room in 3 strides. You know that's not true. Do I? Because from the outside it looks exactly like what they're saying. Poor single mom, rich lonely man, convenient rescue. It's a perfect story for people who want to believe the worst. I don't care what they believe. You should. Isla's voice cracked. This is your reputation. Your company. Your life. And I brought all of this down on you because I was too desperate to. You were surviving. There's no shame in that. There's nothing but shame in it. The words came out raw, stripped of pretense. Every article, every comment, every photo, they're all screaming the same thing. That I'm not good enough. That I never was. That I used you. Callum's hands found her shoulders, steadying. Look at me. She couldn't. If she looked at him, she'd break completely. Isla. Look at me. She forced her eyes up, and the tenderness in his expression nearly undid her. You didn't use me, he said quietly. You saved me. You saved Bennett. And I'm not letting them take that away from either of us. Callum. We fight this. Together. There's no fighting this. It's already everywhere. By tomorrow, Bryn's school will have seen it. Other parents will whisper. Teachers will judge. She'll hear things no 7-year-old should have to hear about her mother. The thought of Bryn facing cruelty because of her, because of choices Isla had made out of desperation, it was unbearable. Then we pull her from that school. Find somewhere better. Somewhere. Running doesn't fix this. Isla pulled away from his touch, wrapping her arms around herself. Nothing fixes this. The internet is forever. These articles, these photos, these comments, they'll follow us. Follow her. Forever. Her phone buzzed again. Another message. Another judgment from a stranger. She picked it up, ready to throw it across the room when she saw the sender. Damien. Her blood turned to ice. The message was simple. Saw the news. Courts won't like this. See you soon. Of course. Of course Damien would use this. Would feed it to his lawyers, use it as evidence that she was unstable, that her judgment was compromised, that Bryn deserved better. And maybe he was right. Maybe Bryn did deserve better than a mother whose desperation had made her an internet headline, a cautionary tale, a target for strangers' cruelty. What is it? Callum asked, seeing her face drain of color. She handed him the phone. Watched his jaw clench as he read the message. He's going to use this, Isla whispered. In court. He'll say I'm living inappropriately, that I'm exposing Bryn to scandal, that she needs stability I can't provide. No court would. You don't know that. You don't know how these things work when you're poor and fighting someone who looks good on paper. Her voice rose with desperation. Courts see headlines. They see public perception. And right now, public perception is that I'm exactly what these articles say I am. Callum was quiet for a moment, something shifting behind his eyes. When he spoke, his voice was firm. Then we changed the narrative. How? I'll hold a press conference. Tell the truth. Explain what really happened. That won't help. It'll just make it worse. They'll say you're defending me because we're involved, which will feed into their story that. I don't care what they say. You should. The words exploded out of her. You should care about your reputation, your company, your son's future. You should care that associating with me is destroying everything you've built. None of that matters if. It all matters. Isla's voice broke. It all matters, Callum. And I can't be the reason you lose it. Silence fell between them, heavy and charged. I should leave, Isla said quietly. Take Bryn and go. It's the only way to make this stop. No. Callum. No. His voice was absolute. You're not leaving. We're not letting them win. They've already won. Look at this. She gestured at her phone, at the endless stream of cruelty. We can't fight this. We can. And we will. Before she could argue further, there was a knock at the guest house door. Isla's stomach dropped. Reporters. Had to be. They'd found the estate, gotten past security somehow. But when Callum opened the door, it wasn't a reporter. It was a woman in her late 30s, impeccably dressed in a designer suit, with sharp eyes and an expression that suggested she'd seen worse than internet scandal and lived to tell the tale. Mr. Reed. She extended her hand. I'm Celeste Hartman from your board. We need to talk. The emergency board meeting was called for that afternoon. Callum sat at the head of the conference table, surrounded by faces he'd known for years. Colleagues, investors, people who'd helped build Reed Global into what it was. And every single one of them looked at him like he'd lost his mind. Celeste stood at the presentation screen, remote in hand, pulling up article after article. The headlines filled the wall-sized monitor, each one more damaging than the last. Stock prices are down 4% since this morning, she said, voice cool and professional. We've had 17 calls from major investors expressing concern. Social media sentiment is overwhelmingly negative, and it's affecting brand perception across all our holdings. She clicked to the next slide. Charts. Graphs. Data that proved, mathematically, that Isla's presence in his life was a liability. The solution is simple, Celeste continued. Ms. Moreno leaves quietly. We issue a statement clarifying that she was an employee who is no longer with the company. We emphasize that there was never any romantic involvement. The story dies in a week and we move forward. Heads nodded around the table. Agreement. Relief that someone had articulated the obvious solution. We've even prepared a severance package. Celeste pulled up another document. Generous. 6 months salary, relocation assistance, excellent references. She'll be taken care of and this all goes away. More nods. One of the older board members, Gerald, who'd been with Callum since the beginning, spoke up. It's a fair offer, Cal. More than fair. And it protects the company. Protects you. Protects me from what? Callum's voice was quiet. From this disaster spiraling further. Celeste's tone suggested she was explaining something obvious to someone slow. Right now this is containable. But if it continues, if there are more photos, more articles, more evidence of an ongoing relationship. There isn't a relationship. Yet. Celeste's eyes gleamed. But the optics suggest otherwise. And in business, perception is reality. Callum looked around the table. Saw calculation in every face. Cost-benefit analysis. Risk assessment. Everything reduced to numbers and projections and quarterly reports. These people didn't know Isla. Didn't know Bryn. Didn't know what it felt like to be drowning until someone threw you a rope, even though they were barely treading water themselves. The offer is ready to present, Celeste said. All we need is your approval. Silence filled the boardroom. Every eye on Callum. Waiting for him to do the sensible thing. The business thing. The thing that protected profits and stock prices and reputations built over decades. Callum stood slowly. No. The word landed like a bomb. I'm sorry? Celeste's professional mask slipped slightly. No. Isla isn't leaving. We're not issuing any statement. And anyone who has a problem with that can leave instead. Gerald leaned forward. Cal, be reasonable. We're talking about the company's future. About your reputation. I'm talking about doing what's right. What's right for the company is. I'm not talking about the company. Callum's voice cut through the room like a blade. I'm talking about what's right. Period. Celeste regained her composure. With all due respect, Mr. Reed, your personal feelings can't dictate business decisions. We have a fiduciary responsibility to our shareholders. And I have a moral responsibility to the woman who saved my son's life. Who reminded me what it means to be human. Who's being crucified by strangers because she had the audacity to ask for help when she needed it. That's very noble, Celeste said, voice dripping with condescension. But nobility doesn't pay dividends. This situation is affecting stock prices. Real money. Real consequences. Then let them fall. The room erupted. Multiple voices talking over each other, shock and outrage mixing into chaos. You can't be serious. Think about what you're saying. This is financial suicide. Callum's hand hit the table, silencing them all. Isla Moreno and her daughter are under my protection. They're not leaving. Not because of gossip, not because of stock prices, not because of public opinion. His gaze swept the room. And if any of you have a problem with that, you're welcome to resign. Dead silence. Gerald spoke carefully. Cal, we're trying to help you. This woman? Her name is Isla. And she's not, this woman. She's a person who's faced more hardship in a month than most people in this room will face in a lifetime. She's a mother who's fought for her daughter with nothing but determination and love. His voice caught. She's braver than any of us. She's also a PR nightmare, Celeste said flatly. And you're letting emotions cloud your judgment. Maybe. Callum straightened his jacket. Or maybe I'm finally seeing clearly for the first time in 3 years. He walked toward the door, then paused and looked back. Schedule a press conference for tomorrow morning. I'll handle this myself. Cal, don't. Anyone who wants to leave the company over this, I'll accept your resignation effective immediately with full severance. Anyone who stays, I expect your support. Those are your options. He left the boardroom to stunned silence. In the elevator down to the parking garage, his phone buzzed. Text from Gerald, you're making a mistake. Maybe he was. Maybe standing up for someone who needed defending was bad business. Maybe protecting Isla and Bryn would cost him everything he'd built. But as the elevator doors opened and he walked toward his car, Callum felt something he hadn't felt in years. Certain. Whatever happened next, he knew he'd done the right thing. And that was worth more than any stock price could measure. The press conference was scheduled for 10 a.m. in the Reed Global main lobby. By 9:30, the space was packed with journalists, cameras, microphones, a feeding frenzy of reporters who smelled blood in the water. Isla watched from a side room, hands clenched together so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Callum had insisted she come, said she should hear what he was going to say directly rather than filtered through headlines later. But being here, watching the setup, seeing the eager faces of reporters ready to tear her apart, made her feel like she was about to witness an execution. Bennett stood beside her, surprisingly. He'd asked to come, said he wanted to support his dad. The boy's hand found hers and squeezed. He's going to be okay, Bennett whispered. He knows what he's doing. Isla wished she had that confidence. At exactly 10 a.m., Callum walked out to the podium. Flashbulbs erupted. Questions shouted from every direction, overlapping into incomprehensible noise. Callum held up a hand and gradually the room quieted. Thank you for coming. I'll make a brief statement, then take questions. His voice was steady, authoritative. CEO voice. But Isla could see the tension in his shoulders, the careful control that suggested he was holding back something powerful. Recently, there have been articles about my personal life. Specifically about Isla Moreno and her daughter, Bryn, who are currently living on my estate. I'd like to address those articles directly. A journalist shouted, Mr. Reed, is Ms. Moreno your mistress? Callum's jaw tightened but his voice stayed level. Ms. Moreno is an employee and a friend. He paused. She's also one of the bravest women I've ever met. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Not the denial they'd expected. 3 weeks ago, I met Isla and her daughter at a restaurant. They'd just finished a shift at the diner next door. They were waiting for rain to stop. And Isla's daughter was hungry. He let that word hang in the air. Hungry. Isla approached my table and asked if they could sit while they waited. She offered to pay for a meal with $3.47. Everything she had. The room had gone quiet, reporters actually listening now rather than just waiting for scandal. Isla Moreno wasn't looking for a wealthy man to rescue her. She was looking for basic human kindness while she figured out how to feed her daughter. The articles call her a gold digger. I call her a survivor. He pulled out a paper from his jacket pocket. Here are some facts those articles didn't mention. Isla was working 3 jobs: diner waitress, office cleaning, weekend catering. She'd been evicted through no fault of her own when her rent increased beyond what she could afford. She and her daughter were living in her car, but Isla made sure Bryn still got to school every day, still did her homework, still felt loved and safe despite their circumstances. His voice strengthened, passion breaking through professional control. She didn't ask for my help. I offered it because I have a 10-year-old son who was falling apart, and I didn't know how to help him. Because I'd spent 3 years drowning in grief and work, using one to avoid the other. Because I'd forgotten what it meant to actually live instead of just exist. Isla's eyes burned. He was telling their story. All of it. No sugarcoating, no corporate spin. Just truth. Isla agreed to work as my son's caregiver. She moved into the guest house on my property. And in the 3 weeks since, she's done more for my family than any amount of money could buy. She reminded my son that he matters. She forced me to see what I was doing, how I was failing everyone, including myself. She showed us both what courage looks like when you have nothing but still fight for what matters. A journalist called out, "Are you romantically involved with Ms. Moreno?" Callum paused. His eyes found Isla through the glass of the side room. Held her gaze. "I don't know what we are yet," he said honestly. "But I know she's changed my life. I know she's made my house feel like a home again. I know she's shown me that hiding from pain doesn't heal it, facing it does." The room erupted with questions but Callum spoke over them. "There's one more person I need to address directly. Damien Torres. Isla's ex-husband. The man who abandoned his wife and daughter 4 years ago and is now suddenly interested in custody." Murmurs intensified. This wasn't standard press conference material. "Mr. Torres, if you're watching, and I suspect you are, let me be clear. A man who abandons his child doesn't get to rewrite history when it's convenient. A man who left his family with nothing doesn't get to show up years later and claim Father of the Year. You want to fight for custody? Fine. But know that Isla has resources now. She has support. She has people willing to stand up for her and Bryn. And she has the truth on her side." Callum's voice dropped, became quieter but somehow more powerful. "I've spent 3 years being half alive. Working constantly, achieving everything, feeling nothing. And then a woman with $3.47 taught me something I'd forgotten. That wealth isn't measured in bank accounts. It's measured in presence. In showing up. In fighting for people who matter even when, especially when, the world tells you not to." He looked directly into the cameras. "So no, I'm not asking Isla to leave. I'm not issuing a statement denying involvement. I'm standing here and saying clearly, Isla Moreno and her daughter have a home with us for as long as they want it. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me personally." Questions exploded again, but Callum stepped back from the podium. "That's all I have to say. Thank you." He walked off the stage to chaos, reporters shouting, cameras flashing, the room dissolving into frenzy. But Callum's eyes stayed on Isla through the glass. Asking a question without words. She couldn't speak, couldn't move, could barely breathe. He just risked everything. His reputation, his company, his carefully controlled public image. All of it. For her. Bennett squeezed her hand. Told you he knew what he was doing. Isla managed a shaky laugh that was half sob. Yeah, I guess he did. Can you believe he said that in front of everyone? That he chose honesty over image, chose people over profit? Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is tell the truth when everyone expects you to lie. The courthouse smelled of old wood and stale air and the particular tension that lived in places where people's lives were decided by strangers in robes. Isla sat at the plaintiff's table, her lawyer, the best Callum's money could buy, beside her with files and papers and evidence of her fitness as a mother. Across the aisle, Damien sat with his own lawyer, looking every inch the reformed man, clean-cut, well-dressed, expression carefully arranged into contrition. The custody hearing had been fast-tracked, likely due to the media attention. Judge Morrison, a woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and an expression that suggested she'd heard every lie humanity had to offer, sat behind the bench reviewing documents. Isla's hands trembled in her lap. Bryn was in a waiting room with a social worker, spared from having to sit through this, but Isla felt her daughter's absence like a physical wound. What if this went wrong? What if the judge believed Damien's reformation story? What? Ms. Moreno. Her lawyer's voice was gentle. Breathe. We have a strong case. Strong wasn't the same as guaranteed. Judge Morrison looked up. We'll begin with Mr. Torres's petition for joint custody. Mr. Torres, you may take the stand. Damien stood, walked to the witness box with the careful humility of someone who'd practiced this moment. He placed his hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, sat down with eyes downcast. His lawyer began. Mr. Torres, can you explain why you're seeking custody of your daughter now after 4 years? I made mistakes. Damien's voice was quiet, regretful. Terrible mistakes. When Bryn was 3, I was struggling with addiction. I wasn't fit to be a father. So I left, thinking it was better for them if I got my life together first. Isla's nails dug into her palms. Lies. All lies. He'd left because being a father was inconvenient, because responsibility was boring, because there was always somewhere better to be than home. And did you? Get your life together? The lawyer prompted. Yes. I've been clean for 2 years. I have steady employment. I've completed therapy and parenting classes. I'm ready to be the father Bryn deserves. Why now? Because I saw the news about Isla living with a wealthy man. And I worried about Bryn's stability, about whether she was in an appropriate environment. Damien's eyes found Isla across the room. I want what's best for my daughter. The implication was clear. Living with Isla wasn't best. Judge Morrison's expression remained neutral. Mr. Torres, in the 4 years since you left, how many times did you contact your daughter? Damien hesitated. I didn't want to disrupt her life until I was ready to be consistent. So 0 times? I sent birthday cards. Did you? The judge's voice was sharp. Because Ms. Moreno's records show no cards received, no child support paid, no attempts at contact of any kind. Damien's lawyer interjected smoothly. My client was protecting his daughter from seeing him at his worst, Your Honor. It was an act of love. Or an act of abandonment, Judge Morrison countered. Ms. Moreno, please take the stand. Isla's legs felt weak as she stood. The walk to the witness box felt eternal. She swore on the Bible with a shaking hand, sat down, tried to steady her breathing. Her lawyer began with easy questions. Her work history. Her relationship with Bryn. The circumstances that led to meeting Callum. Then Damien's lawyer took over, circling like a shark who'd scented blood. Ms. Moreno, isn't it true that you're currently living with a man you barely know? I'm employed by him. Living in employee housing. Employee housing. The lawyer's tone dripped with skepticism. Yet you attend family dinners together. Your daughter plays with his son. You're photographed in intimate moments. That seems like more than an employment arrangement. Objection, Isla's lawyer said. Relevance. It speaks to Ms. Moreno's judgment and the environment she's providing for the child. Judge Morrison considered. I'll allow it. Ms. Moreno, please answer. Isla chose her words carefully. Callum Reed is my employer and friend. He's been kind to me and my daughter during a difficult time. There's nothing inappropriate about our relationship. Yet. Damien's lawyer smiled. You're a single woman, recently homeless, working for a wealthy widower. One might say you've landed in a very convenient situation. Objection. Isla's lawyer stood. Counsel is testifying rather than questioning. Sustained. Get to your point, counselor. My point, Your Honor, is that Ms. Moreno has demonstrated poor judgment in her living situation and financial management. She was evicted. Because my rent increased beyond what 3 jobs could pay, Isla interrupted, voice stronger now. Not because of poor judgment. Because the cost of living is impossible for working people. Yet Mr. Torres has managed to maintain stable housing. Mr. Torres abandoned his 3-year-old daughter. The words burst out of Isla before she could stop them. He left us with nothing. No warning. No support. No contact for 4 years. And now he shows up because he thinks there's money involved, and you're questioning my judgment. Ms. Moreno, the lawyer began. Where was his judgment when Bryn cried herself to sleep asking where her daddy went? Where was his concern for her stability when we were living in my car? When she was doing homework by streetlight because we couldn't afford to run the engine for heat? Your Honor. I worked 3 jobs, Isla continued, voice breaking. I made sure she never missed school. Never went hungry, not truly, not more than I could help. I taught her to be kind and brave and good despite every reason to be bitter. And I did it alone because he chose to walk away. Silence filled the courtroom. Judge Morrison leaned forward. Ms. Moreno, do you have anything else to add? Just this. Isla looked directly at Damien. Being a parent isn't about showing up when it's convenient. It's about showing up when it's hard. When it's exhausting. When it's thankless. You chose easy. I chose my daughter. Every single day. That's the difference between us. She stepped down from the witness box on shaking legs. Judge Morrison made notes. I'd like to call a witness mentioned in the pretrial filings. Bennett Reed. Isla's head snapped up. Bennett? Callum hadn't told her. The courtroom doors opened and Bennett walked in. He was dressed in a suit that made him look older, but his face was pale, nervous. He caught Isla's eye and gave a small nod. What was he doing? Bennett took the stand, swore his oath, sat down with his hands folded carefully in his lap. Bennett, Judge Morrison's voice was gentler now. Do you understand why you're here? Yes, ma'am. To talk about Isla and Bryn. Can you tell me about your relationship with Ms. Moreno? Bennett took a breath. When Isla came to work for my dad, I was mean to her. Really mean. Because I was angry that my dad couldn't see I needed help, so he hired someone else to fix me. And did that change? Yeah. Because Isla didn't try to fix me. She just saw me. One night I was crying in the garden and she found me. She didn't tell me everything would be okay or give me advice. She just sat with me. Let me be sad. And that helped more than anything. Judge Morrison nodded. What about Bryn? Ms. Moreno's daughter? Bryn's amazing. She's always happy even though they didn't have much. She shares everything. She's kind to everyone. And she loves her mom so much. Bennett's voice grew stronger. My mom died 3 years ago. And after she was gone, my dad kind of forgot I was there. He worked all the time. Never came to my stuff. Never ate dinner with me. I felt invisible. That must have been difficult. It was. But Isla made my dad see what he was doing. She stood up to him, actually yelled at him, because I needed someone to. And now my dad and I do stuff together. He comes to my games. We have dinner. He sees me again. Bennett looked directly at the judge. Isla did that. She's brave and honest and she fights for people even when it's hard. Thank you, Bennett. One more question. If you could tell Judge Morrison one thing about what makes a good parent, what would it be? Bennett didn't hesitate. A good parent shows up. Not just when it's easy or fun. But every day. Even when they're tired or sad or don't know what to do. They show up anyway. His eyes found Damien across the courtroom. Bryn's mom never left. She fought every day. That's what parents do. The words landed like a verdict. Judge Morrison excused Bennett, who walked past Isla and squeezed her shoulder as he left. She wanted to hug him, to thank him, but he was already gone. I'd like to speak with the child in my chambers, Judge Morrison announced. Bryn Moreno. Privately. Isla's heart stopped. This was it. The moment that would decide everything. The wait while the judge spoke with Bryn felt eternal. Isla sat rigid in her chair, unable to breathe properly, while Damien's lawyer and her own lawyer shuffled papers and whispered strategies. Finally the judge returned. Bryn wasn't with her, had probably been taken back to the waiting room. Judge Morrison's expression was unreadable as she resumed her seat. I've reviewed all testimony and evidence. I've spoken with Bryn privately. She paused. Mr. Torres, I appreciate that you've made efforts to improve your life. Sobriety is commendable. Employment is important. However, this court's primary concern is the best interest of the child. Damien leaned forward, hopeful. You abandoned your daughter for 4 years. No contact, no support, no presence in her life whatsoever. You return only after seeing media coverage suggesting Ms. Moreno has access to wealth. Your petition feels less motivated by paternal love and more by financial opportunity. Your Honor, that's not. I'm not finished. Judge Morrison's voice cut through. Furthermore, when I asked Bryn who she wanted to live with, her answer was immediate and certain. My mama. Always my mama. Those were her exact words. Isla's eyes burned with tears she couldn't let fall yet. This court finds that Ms. Moreno has demonstrated consistent, devoted parenting under extraordinarily difficult circumstances. The fact that she's recently found stable employment and housing is to be celebrated, not punished. Judge Morrison looked directly at Damien. Mr. Torres, you will be granted supervised visitation rights. 1 afternoon per month, supervised by a court-appointed professional. If you can demonstrate consistent, appropriate involvement for 1 year, we'll revisit the custody arrangement. But primary custody remains with Ms. Moreno. The gavel came down with a sharp crack that felt like liberation. Isla sagged in her chair, breath leaving her body in a rush. She'd won. Bryn was hers. Safe. Protected. Across the aisle, Damien's face twisted with fury. He stood abruptly, chair scraping. This is bullshit. You're rewarding her for gold digging. Mr. Torres, you will not address this court with profanity. Bailiff, please escort Mr. Torres out. Damien was still shouting as security took his arms, his mask of reform cracking completely to show the entitled anger beneath. The courtroom doors closed behind him, muffling his protests. Isla's lawyer squeezed her arm. Congratulations. It's over. But Isla couldn't move yet. Couldn't process. Couldn't believe it was real. Then Bennett appeared beside her and Callum right behind him, and suddenly she was surrounded by people who'd fought for her, who'd stood up when standing was hard.